OK， 我们是 resume 我们的最后一个 chapter Evolving Traditional Buddhism。当然这个 chapter 我觉得这个
English
I forgot already. So I know that this chapter is so it's been arranged in the last chapter. I mean, certainly people have different opinions, but then I think it's a kind of because I think the previous 8 chapters it was about actually the basic teachings, including the life of the Buddha and so forth, and what is meant by the Sangha, and then all is about the Dharma, many focus, and then also is one of the important topics about the meditation topic and insight meditation or samadhi or the concentration meditation. And then you have this Mahayana Buddhism, and of course before that there you have the Abhidhamma, so which is I mean certainly without the Abhidhamma certainly maybe I mean it's one of the like a scholastic, sometimes people understand as the scholastic study. And then you have the Mahayana. After you introduce the Mahayana, then you need to talk about, I mean, the area where, what kind of Buddhism are going on, and a little bit of the history there. So basically I would say involved traditional Buddhism, many focus on, so far we know the Buddhist still exists, there. So we are not going to address the past history, like even in Malaysia, for example, Indonesia, and Afghanistan and Pakistan, then they were a Buddhist country, or even a lot of places in Central Asia. But those are not the topic we are addressing. Okay, so first we will say about the Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka and in Southeast Asia, Southern Buddhism. I think it's very important to know why we have to mention the Theravada Buddhism first. Okay, I mean this is not bias. I mean a lot of people think that we be biased. Why you want to talk about Theravada first? I mean in historical study, based on the texture we have, I mean certainly whatever you said, whether depending on how you understand the Theravada, still for the textual reasons or even for the evolvement, I mean like in Buddhism in India complete death already. So nobody want to talk about that, and that is not in the present time. Maybe there's some movement in India. So and Nepal is supposed to be a country that believe they're a Buddhist country. I think maybe there's a little bit introduced here, so I'm not going to talk that yet. So, but still certainly Theravada Buddhism been introduced. Except India, Buddhism been introduced to the country as a first, certainly is in Sri Lanka. So that you need to talk that first, And still exists, the Buddhism there. So maybe the Buddhism was widespread in lots of places before Ashoka, or even during the time in India, but those are dead, completely gone. So, we are only just addressing the issue is that Buddhism in where, and so certainly you need to start with the Theravada. Why I want to stress this again, a lot of people study Buddhism, they think, oh, they are Hinayana, they are what, this is not the way to study Buddhism. You have to know existing, so far now Buddhism still exists in which country, they still at least, I don't mean that they from the earlier time until now they are still the same, but certainly the Buddhism introduced to Sri Lanka, until now they still exist, okay, during before Christ 300 years, get it now? Okay. In other words, you could argue that nowadays, except India now gone, they have a new movement more recently, but almost like not dying at least, in some way, not dying, complete not dying, Buddhism still exists, is in Sri Lanka. During the 3rd century until now, it's almost more than 2,300 years ago. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we don't have to say that earlier. Why don't we just start to say the Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, Southern Buddhism. Okay. You want to read that? Yeah.
Okay. Buddhism arrived in Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BCE. For the next 1,000 years or so, Sri Lanka was a great center of Buddhist learning. The early spread and history of Buddhism in Southeast Asia, on the other hand, is complex. While the Theravada Buddhism of the Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia should not be viewed as a uniform and monolithic whole, it does have a certain unity exemplified by the persistence of one main monastic Vinaya lineage and the authority of the Pali Canon and its commentaries, inherited from the Mahavihara of ancient Anuradhapura, but this is no simple orthodoxy. A variety of interpretations and practices have probably always existed and persist down to modern times. Too often the models and norms for religious history employed by modern scholarship revolve around concepts of theism, heresy, orthodoxy, sect, and denomination derived from the history of Christianity. These concepts are not always appropriate and obscure the religious history of Buddhism rather than shed light upon it.
Okay, all right. I think this is important. When Professor Rupert writes this thing about the models about the school and sects and orthodox and denominations. I mean, nowadays, even in the early times, especially in the West, when they do research, they always think that the Buddhists have this school and sect as the Christianity, But, and actually, I think that there's a very thin line saying that the concepts are not always appropriate and obscure the religious history of Buddhism rather than shed light upon it, okay? There are a lot of examples. For example, when you said that the Sri Lankan Buddhism say that, for example, during the Christian era, colonization, for example, that's one other thing. And people say that, okay, the Buddhism in Sri Lanka completely gone. They were thinking almost like the Christianity, then they be persecuted and die, everybody die like that. But not that they are completely gone, but just only the power was not there. For example, like that. So a lot of very small detail and which is actually could change your way of understanding Buddhism. About the school and sect is very different. For example, like a Mahayana and Hinayana. In the earlier time, not necessarily as the way they think that when you're Mahayana, they hate Hinayana in a way. So almost like Catholic, when they have the war between the evangelical Christians, even in France Revolution and so forth. Anyway, and a lot of about the council too, how the Buddhists have different council and how they have different opinions, and how all these different opinions, how they later on came up from a different school, and they still their involvement is very different from Christianity. Okay, all right. Now let's look for the Sri Lanka now. So
the initial formative phase of Theravada Buddhism was completed by 1000 CE. This is not to say that there are no subsequent developments or changes, but that Theravada Buddhism largely defines itself by reference to traditions and teachings that were established between the 5th and 10th centuries in Sri Lanka. The 12th and 13th centuries should also be seen as a significant creative period. Following the introduction of Buddhism to Sri Lanka by Mahinda in the 3rd century BCE, see Chapter 2, there emerged 3 great divisions of the Sangha on the island, each centering on a monastery in the ancient capital of Anuddhaputra. The oldest, the Mahavihara, or Great Monastery, was established by Mahinda himself in the 3rd century. The Abba...
I think it should be right, 3rd century BCE.
The Abhayagiri Vihara in the 1st century BCE and the Jetavana in the 3rd century BCE.
That was the 3rd century.
Famed as a center of Buddhist learning, Anuddhaputra attracted visiting monks from the Indian mainland, including one of Theravada Buddhism's subsequently most celebrated commentator, Dhammadipa, 7th century, and also China Faxian in the early 5th century.
Beginning in the 5th century, a series of commentators Buddhaghosa, Buddhadatta, Mahanama, Upasena, Dhammapala I, Dhammapala II, drawing on the traditions and textual resources of the Mahavihara, established the classical doctrinal forms of the Theravada, and it is their writing that have come down to us. The 5th century also saw the basic content and structure of the Pali Canon finally established. First, a Vinaya comprising 2 principal works. Second, a Sutta Pitaka comprising the 4 primary Nikaya and the 15 works of the Khuddaka Nikaya. Third, Abhidhamma Pitaka comprising 7 works. Since now the writings of the monks of the Abhayagiri and Jetavana monasteries survive, with the possible exception of Upatisa's Vimudimagga, which exists only in Chinese translation. It is not entirely clear in what manner their traditions differed from those of the Mahavihara. The tendency to see the undoubted rivalry between them in terms of Mahavihara opposition to their Mahayana sympathies is both simplistic and problematic. It is important to bear in mind, however, that the Abhayagiri and Jetavana monastery continue to flourish, and their monks were as much part of the Sri Lankan Buddhist scene as those of the Mahavihara.
You want to continue to read that?
Okay. Invasion of the island from South India resulted in the Sri Lanka coast freeing further south to Polonnaruwa, which was established as a permanent capital of the island in the 11th century after the defeat of the South Indian invaders by Vijaya Buha or Bahu first. From the 2nd century BCE, South Indian kings had invaded and ruled on several occasions in Anuradhapura without causing any cultural continuity. But the wars of the 10th and the 11th centuries proved particularly destructive of ancient Sri Lankan culture. The extent to which the lineage of the Buddhist Sangha was disrupted is not entirely clear, but it appears that the order of nuns died out at the time, and the contact with Burma played some part in the re-establishment of the traditions of the 3 ancient lineages of the Mahavihara, Abhayagiri, and Jetavana. In 1165, however, following a dispute between these 3 lineages, King Parakrama Bahu first unified the Sangha according to the rule of the Mahavihara, but the Buddhism of Sri Lanka should not be regarded as a simple Mahavihara orthodoxy at this period of earlier. Indeed, it is doubtful that Buddhism anywhere has ever operated quite in the manner of an orthodoxy. From earlier times, continued contact with South India, where it appears Theravada traditions flourished until at least the 14th century, and the arrival of monks from outside the island meant that various Buddhist influences and practices, including those of the Mahayana and the Vajrayana, were present on the island.
Okay, I think the last paragraph I don't want to read, just say that during the invasion time, and Polonnaruwa is the 2nd biggest capital in Sri Lanka. They moved the capital because of the invasion of the South Indian people. That's what they call Jola people. And then, then later on, even the fall of the Polonnaruwa as the second capital in the 12,150. So, and then they also, Buddhism started to decline really hugely. Okay. During the 16th and then especially from the 16th century, then you had the Portuguese from 1505 to 1658. It was actually, it was from the south, many. They stayed in the Sri Lankan south. And the Dutch later came, but the Dutch actually, at first, they come out also, because, they were very powerful on the sea, marine. And then they arrived even in the south as well. However, because of certain reason, and the king in the Kandy at that time talked to the Dutch, I forgot what they call that, anyway, the authority. So then later on, actually, the Dutch people helping the king to put these Portuguese people away because for the power struggle, for the power reason. And then, however, later on, then when the British came and they really then take hold the whole country, during that time, after the British colonization. And the last kingdom you have to understand in Sri Lanka that they call it Kandy. That's why they call it Kandyan Kingdom. Okay. But it actually, even though during the British colonization, in some way, at the earlier time, the kings still exist there. And they were kind of like, when the British arrived, they were not really like kill them at first, but they were really like share their power, and at first. Okay. But later on, and then this kind of royal family has gone, so until it's completely gone. I think it's also, but now since this is about Buddhism, the state of monastic Buddhism reached a low ebb in the 17th and 18th century. You could understand that because during the foreign invasion, you would say. So, and then that time, even it means that even the Buddhist lineage is going to be very weak, and that's why they need help. But I somehow think that is not necessarily just because that the lineage is also, they definitely that time need to be recognized again by the other king. Okay, that's why they send the lineage to the Thailand during the Sri Lankan king Kriti Sri Rajasingha. So at that time, so they request the British allowed them to do so, and then they send some other monk who go to Thailand and also Burma to get this Vinaya back also. Okay. Anyway, the 19th and the 12th century saw the emergence of new modernist trends, sometimes referred to as a Protestant and Buddhism in response to Christian missionary activities. Modernization increased European interest in Buddhist thought and practice. In other words, but if you look at the Sri Lanka history, it's kind of like they certainly have a lot of approach. For example, if you look at the Pali text that's been translated in English, or is mostly done by the Sri Lanka. I mean, when I say Sri Lanka, I don't mean the Sri Lanka monk itself only, but a lot of even like the earlier people who have studied through the translation, they all learn the teachings in Sri Lanka. Yeah. All right, that's basically it's a very general idea about the Sri Lankan history and serve as the earlier, which so far still exists, the Buddhism and the whole thing about. All right, you have any question about comment about the Buddhism in Sri Lanka?
Can you tell us about what this Protestant Buddhism is about? That's mentioned here.
I'm not sure. I think I guess. I don't know. It's I think because this is certainly in contrast to the Thai Buddhism and so-called the Burmese Buddhism, and then Sri Lanka certainly sound more like a Protestant. Maybe that's what he mean by that, because I guess they certainly have much more experience about how the missionary work is doing. For example, in Sri Lanka, Protestant here refer to then they definitely need to have a lot of movement in order to help the Buddhism not to be declined, because they learned from their past history that they didn't really make that movement. For example, one of the movements, the Sunday school. You know that Sunday school, certainly in Buddhist tradition or even in Indian tradition, you don't have the concept of Sunday. Okay. Now in Sri Lanka, Sunday school is very important. In the earlier time when they have revived after they were independent from the Britain, so actually Sunday school is very important thing, and every kid have to go to Sunday school, and they have to pass exam. If they don't pass exam, it means the morally is bad. Okay, don't you think this is Protestant? It definitely is not a very, it's not original Buddhist kind of movement. And even if you find a job, if you have the certificate that you've been done to Sunday school, means you're a good person, you're an honest person, you will not tell lie, so you can get a job much easier, you know, and so forth. Those are, it's very clear. This is all learned from when there were colonization, you know. You know, in colonization, if you're Christian, you definitely easy find a job, much easier. And if you go to church, you'll be a choir, you attend in a church for long, and you have much more opportunity to get a job. The same thing in Britain. Only recently this 20, 30 year change, otherwise the same thing. And I was told by the Christian, even in Britain as well. And if you can send a boy especially to the very famous, like the church, to do the choir, then you can far easier to get a job anytime. Yeah, that is one of the very important resume. Actually, in Sri Lanka, still you have this. If you are active in Buddhism, and particularly you have a high monk who write your recommend letter, your job is very safe in many ways. Yeah, okay. That's why, I mean, the one we have in Protestant, there are many ways. And then, for example, we never have the Buddhist school in a way, because during in Sri Lanka, during the Christianity time or even earlier, they completely abolished the education system in Sri Lanka, and then have the new so-called what we now in America now you're doing. You think that's the only one. That's not true. So that's why they changed the whole education system. At that time, they completely abolished the Buddhist study. But of course, then you encourage to study Christianity. And then in order to be Protestant and to revise that, now the school, and a lot of the Buddhist school have been raised, and it was highly supported by people. Now, Ananda College is one of the best college. And of course, still some people think if you want to have a best English, you have to go to the Christian school. In general, still, but that Ananda College, of course, they know that the English is very important. So it's also highly emphasis on English, even though their best is in the Sinhalese language. So, and there are a lot of these, and then they certainly encourage a lot of people to take Buddhism as a subject to study. As I told you, in Sri Lanka, certainly from the primary school, okay, that's almost like compulsory subject that everybody will study Buddhism in the school. At least for an early time, later on it become like almost like just ethical study. You must understand the culture of Sri Lanka. When you see the monk, what you should do, and like that. It's more like a civic kind of understanding. And then also in the high school, of course, in juniors, in the junior school, we call the secondary school. And the secondary school, and then you definitely could choose your A-level examination, or O-level examination in Buddhism study. So, like that, you know. And just like earlier time, you could study Christianity in the school, but Buddhism was very highly encouraged, you know. And as I say, it's still become a traditional culture. If you study Buddhism as a kind of subject, it means you're a good person. You're supposed to know a lot about good Buddhism, and you're supposed to be a good person who can find a job much easier. So, like that. Yeah. Don't you think this is Protestant? But this never exists. It's actually, if you look at it in the whole country, it's only established in Sri Lanka to start with. Yeah. None of the country do that. Yeah. All right, now let's go back before that, and this is, I mean, I think comparatively this is a longer introductory about it. Sri Lanka. Any question about that or comment? Yeah.
I have a question. Though in this article, I mean, this book, you didn't explain why, the reason. But it says the order of the nuns die out at the 11th century.
No, the thing it is because during the 11th, 12th century, it's not only the nun die out, it's even the monk tradition is die out. But I want to say that the die out in a way, it doesn't mean that they completely like no monks and no nuns. Mm-hmm. But it almost like there's no such a powerful organizations still carrying on that. Because you see, in Buddhism, you certainly have to recognize that the so-called Sangha, right? Mm-hmm. That's why they use the term Sangha. I mean, this is definitely you must understand the term Sangha mean. So, for example, now if Theravada country one day been bombed, Sri Lanka bombed, okay, gone, and Thailand bombed and gone, and Burma bombed and gone, who are we? Get it now? And what happened is that Then somehow Sri Lanka or Thailand, which country, and they revived the Buddhism, and they found actually there was a group of monks which supported by the king. This is always very important. At the country, I don't know which, say Cambodia, somehow Cambodia have no Buddhism, later will learn. After the communists are completely gone, but now they revive because they got it. Now they still survive then. And then now you could say that now then everybody, including us, maybe somehow we have come from the lineage of Cambodia because our lineage is gone. You know. Understand that? I mean, it doesn't mean I suspect, it doesn't mean that there's no monk exists there. Like us, we might still exist, but just gone. Now, the problem is that there was a lot of theory we never know, and the nuns have the same problem. Okay. But some say that actually during the 11th and 12th century, because when you look at this, you have to look in the big pictures to understand the Southeast Asia Buddhism. So that time they need to revive Buddhism from Burma, actually mainly. So ask the Burma king, because the Burma was very devoted in Buddhism at that time. So to do the revive. And now the thing it is that maybe you have to understand that history, but problem is nowadays when they do the research, you only talk about the nuns gone. You have to know much about what happened in Burma during that time, the nuns, whether the nuns exist at that time. If they don't exist, then completely gone. The same thing actually during the 11th, 12th century, the whole nun lineage was completely gone there. So that's what, as far as I know. So like that, yeah.
Question about the Sunday school system. Did they imitate the Christian practices during the British colonial period, or was it something originally in their own culture?
No, they imitate that Christian.
Got it.
We don't have Sunday. And all day before the Christians were really colonized the country, their holiday is only Full Moon Day and New Moon Day.
According to the lunar calendar.
Yeah.
Got it.
Never have this so-called Sunday, no.
Mm-hmm.
And during the Buddha's birthday time, that what we call Vexa, of course, is a 1 week holiday. Now it's just only 1 day. Mm-hmm. This is all done by the Christian, the what we call post-colonization problem, at least from a Buddhist tradition. And there was a time actually some Sinhalese monks want to revive that. They say, why we have to celebrate the Sunday as them? But the problem now, the commercial problem, all the working people are like that. In old day, they are Full Moon Day and New Moon Day is out of day. That means the farmers, everybody stop the job and go to temple. You know. And then during the Buddha birthday, of course, then they will have the 1 week holiday. And you know, all day the Asian people, I don't know whether they are working hard or not, but that's how the holiday they have. Yeah. And still I have old tradition during that day. Almost like everybody be vegetarian, not because they are vegetarian, but it's many they don't encourage killing. So, and during the New Moon Day and Full Moon Day, especially Full Moon Day, for sure that nobody will kill like that, yeah, any animal. So, you know, they don't have fridge in all day. So, in other words, that was the time you're not going to buy any meat to eat, yeah, because no fresh meat to eat, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is in that sense certainly Sri Lankan Buddhism is become kind of Protestant in that way.
So here's a work that's mentioned, Vimuttimagga. I heard Visuddhimagga is written based on the model of Vimuttimagga.
No, I mean this is certainly is not. You cannot say that way. When you do study, no. The thing it is for sure because Vimuttimagga brought by the Fascian, you know, during the 5th century. But for sure that for the textual study, Vimuttimagga later on translated into China in Chinese, but certainly what we call the word is done earlier than Visuddhimagga. So what we certainly know that in terms of the text, treatise that is an earlier text than the Visuddhimagga. It doesn't mean they copy from this. I mean, this is for just a text study, but you for sure that this kind of system is very popular in Sri Lanka. And then there were some other people trying to argue whether the Vimuttimagga belonged to the belonged to the Abhayagiri, one of the temple, like that. But there's no proof yet. But it's just only proof because we're only guessing because all the Chinese monks, like Fa Xian, when he stayed in Sri Lanka at that time, they were hosted by the Abhayagiri. But it's highly probable, but it's not 100% because he didn't mention this from Abhayagiri, right? In a way, I don't mean the copy from. It's the very common understanding in Sri Lankan Buddhist system about the 7 Visuddhi, the 7 purification. Yeah.
And is there any major differences between the two works?
There are. I mean, it's very clear that some people argue that because in Visuddhimagga, for example, during the Samadhi section, he also mentioned, for example, one of these examples, he said, some people say that they are these kind of people belong to Greek people and then also intellectual together and so forth. And he didn't think that should be the way to think. He's not completely against it. He just say it's not the best way. And suddenly he want to uphold that this idea is not from Mahavihara idea. So like that. And then they have a kind of different system upholding this, like what kind of person, nature, what nature of person should practice what. So they might have different opinions. Then in the Visuddhimagga and Vibhuddhimagga, you could look at a lot of differences are there. Not a big issue. In general, it's fine. Not the whole structure, but it's in detail. Of course, there are still quite similar. Some idea. Even when you look at the Anapanasati, still they have a little different opinions from the Mahavihara. And this is how interesting that how Mahavihara certainly know this is belong to Mahavihara or not Mahavihara. And even I don't know. At that time, I did do a lot of comparative study in earlier time when I was in Sri Lanka. I don't know yet. I don't remember. I didn't look at it from the Abhidhamma perspective whether they really are same Abhidhamma. That I don't know. I think that maybe need people to do that. They do have mentioned something about whether then you can kind of like trace whether they also learn almost like the same Abhidhamma. I won't say that it's copy from him. No. Yeah. But people, of course, I can argue that definitely Buddha must know there's Vibhuddhimagga there.
But do we have any information about its author, Upatissa?
No. That's still argue, and then also study translated by the Cambodia people. But nowadays, actually, the Cambodian people some people thought it's Cambodia. No, it's mean by the, looks like that time it referred to the area might be in the Bangladesh, by a Bangladesh monk who translated that into Chinese. Yeah. Vibhuddhimagga. I would not say it's a good translation. I don't mean that not good at all, because it looks like when he did his translation, he doesn't consult the old Chinese way, how they use the terminology. They have their own terminology. That's a reason why if you don't know Pali or don't read Visuddhimagga in earlier time, it is very hard to read the text. Because it's almost like a different language, imagine, and how these other traditions can understand what they are saying. Yes.
In Chinese.
Vibhuddhimagga 就是解脱道论。
我知道，我就是要问，那个有寻有事跟这个有觉有关。
No, that's from the sutta.
对，一个是清净道论讲的有寻有事，然后那个一个是有觉有关是。
No. 有觉有关有寻有事 both language actually are from Agama.
哦，是哦。
It had nothing to do with the Vibhuddhimagga. No.
It's a translation choice.
Oh.
Yeah, some I forgot which Agama translate 有寻有事 some Agama translate as 有觉有关. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I would say actually some argue that especially from the Vipassana perspective, 有觉有关 is better translation than the 有寻有事. Yeah. All right. Any other questions about the area? No. All right. We come to the Southeast Asia now. I mean, yeah. Do you want to read?
Sure. Indian cultural influence began to extend into Southeast Asia.
Oh, is it? No, sorry.
from the early centuries of the Christian era, and various forms of Hinduism and traditions of Buddhism had established themselves throughout the region by the end of the first millennium. Tradition has it that Buddhism first entered the area in the 3rd century BCE with missions sent by Ashoka, and this is not impossible. Archaeological evidence confirms the existence of a form of Theravada Buddhism in the Pyu and Hmong kingdoms in what is now Burma and Thailand from the 5th century CE. This form of Theravada may have been introduced from southern India rather than Sri Lanka. Links between the capital of the Burmese kingdom at Pagan and Sri Lankan Theravada in the 11th century during the reign of King Anuruddha indicate that by this period, the Theravada lineages of the Sangha were well established in the region.
Do you want to read one more sentence? Yeah,
The powerful
paragraph.
kingdom of the
Khmer.
Khmers, centered on Angkor, dominated much of the region to the southeast, parts of what is now Thailand and Cambodia, from the 8th to the 15th centuries, and here different forms of both Hindu and Buddhist practice flourished. Inscriptional evidence from the 8th century suggests the presence of the Theravada Sangha within the Khmer cultural sphere, and from the 12th century, Hmong forms of Theravada became increasingly influential both at court and among the population as a whole. The Thai kingdom began to establish themselves from the 13th century, centering first on Sukhothai in the north until the 15th century, then on Ayutthaya until the 18th century, and finally on Bangkok until the present. State support for the Theravada Sangha and links with Sri Lanka have been a feature of the kingdom.
All right, okay.
While Cambodia and Burma became French and British colonies respectively, Thailand retained its independence throughout the colonial period. The modernizing influences were not absent from the country, and in the 19th century, Rama IV, 1851 to 68, instigated the establishment of the reformed Dhammadipa lineage of the Sangha. The influence of this reform in Thailand and beyond has resulted in the gradual decline of many of the older esoteric traditions and practices of Southeast Asia Theravada associated with the Mahanikaya lineage and documented in the works of François Bizot. These traditions flourished until most recently in Cambodia, but the fanatical activities of Pol Pot Khmer Rouge between 1975 and 1978, when perhaps 1 million Cambodians died, involved a murder of many monks and the forced derobing of the rest. This means that little is left on the ground.
Okay, all right. Any comments? You've been to Cambodia. Anything you want to say about when you went in Cambodia? What do you feel?
I think the more official figure of people being murdered was close to 2 million or 3 million instead of 1 million.
1 out of 4. 1 out of 4. And a lot of people ran away and did not get killed.
Now we're talking about Theravada, but as far as I know, Theravada, this term came in much later. So how do we know that the type of lineage or type of Buddhist Sangha belongs to Theravada, or what we understand?
No, they only have. I don't understand what your question is about. I mean, when you ordain, even though you don't have the term Theravada, you ordain. You ordain monk or you don't ordain as a monk. That's a different.
No, but say let's rephrase my question. So during the 11th century or whatever century that is, 11th century, King Anuruddha. Okay, so indicate that by this period of the Theravada lineage of Sangha were well established in the region. But Theravada is a very broad and it's a broad term. So they're under Theravada tradition. They might have a lot of different lineages. But during that level,
I mean, my question, I don't know what do you mean by the different lineages?
like for example, during that 11 or 12 centuries, do they call themselves Theravada?
Maybe not, but they are the monk. So I don't understand what you mean the lineage. Do you maybe say, I'm the monk, I ordained in the Mahavihara school, or I ordained as Abhayagiri school. And then because it's very clear in Sri Lanka at that time, the same thing might be in Thailand. When you ordain in that Abhayagiri school, you don't mingle with yourself with the Mahavihara school, especially Mahavihara hate those. And if you are from Mahavihara, as Orthodox school they believe, and then certainly if you ordain there, you don't mingle with the, I mean, when I say mingle, not mean being a friend. Mingle in the term like you don't recite the Vinaya together, you don't go there to do that. So
But at the same time, we know that there might be some other
yeah, maybe say that.
of the Buddhist Sangha exists in.
That's why I'm asking you what mean by the lineage. You tell me. What is in your head?
For example, they might have some other lineage, other schools other than Theravada during that time in that period.
I think you don't understand this. Let me just say it this way. Say that now I'm a monk. You're the monk ordained here as a Thai tradition, okay? And then now you go to India, okay? You live there. So, and then none of them are from Thai tradition or from Sri Lankan tradition. I mean, just give you one example. I don't mean they don't have, I say that in that way. And then, but you are the monk, and then you need to recite the Vinaya. And then it depends on what the temple they accept you. They will say, no problem. The Mahasangha say, you are the monk because you're kind of foreigner. You come here, even though you ordain in Thai tradition, we don't have a Thai, but we have the same Vinaya. So then you come to our place. Well, once you come to in India, let's say the Indian have now they don't have that. Let's say the India now, because Buddhism in India just new, only this 40 years. 30 years, 40 years. Say that now you have a Buddhism called Indian Buddhism, okay? They have a school called Indian school. I don't know. They don't have that yet, let's say. Then you are included in Indian school. We don't have to say they are Theravada. You're the monk. Because you have the same Vinaya, okay?
Yeah, but at the same time, at least during the 7th to 9th century, we know that there's very likely there's a very strong component of
Mahayana.
or whatever you call it, is non-Theravada traditions.
You shouldn't get that. When you are in a Vinaya, you are the same, okay? For them, there's no so-called Mahayana Vinaya, all right? You're the monk. There's no such a thing called Mahayana monk or Hinayana monk. Then, in a certain school, for example, later on, there's at least like Abhayagiri, somehow they influenced by Indian text, then they have Mahayana, right? And the monk practice Mahayana. And then in the Vinaya, basically mean, then they might reject you to join their recital. I mean, supposedly monk have at least once a month, they have recite the Vinaya. They would reject you because you might hold some idea which is disagree with us, then I mean you don't have to say you're a Theravada. Just say you're the monk, which you have a strange idea. I refuse to accept you to recite the Vinaya together. Actually, there was some other school which happened in a certain area. Why they have their own school? It's because they've been rejected. Then they have established their own reciting the Vinaya. It's still based on the Vinaya. It had nothing to do with the term of Theravada.
Yeah. So my question is, you're trying to explain my question. My question is, there are many different schools during that time.
Yeah.
And all of them, why, according to the author, Professor Rupert Gethin, so he only mentioned that, for example, in the Southeast Asia, there are only, well, of course, he probably not mentioned the other school, but in this chapter, he's mentioned that the Theravada lineage of Sangha were well established in that region. But I'm just wondering, except for Theravada tradition, or what we call nowadays called Theravada lineage, were there any other schools or lineages of Sangha that were established in that region at that time?
I think he still get confused about this. Okay, there were a few things to talk about. First, when you say about the Theravada Buddhism, you refer to the Pali Buddhism. They use the Pali as their main text. And the very important is about the Vinaya. As when you talk about Theravada, I mean certainly the monks is as the main rule. And then now the Vinaya is certainly, then they uphold the same Pali Vinaya. Okay.
Yeah.
Now this is another story. When you talk about it, you have to go back to read. This is a thing is about the Buddhism in Thailand, Buddhism in Burma and Cambodia. Of course, in earlier time, even according to history, some of them before the Theravada was very popular, very powerful, they were Mahayana. Okay, that's why here mentioned there are a lot of exotic Buddhism, and they also have highly influenced by Tantrayana. So maybe they don't call themselves as a Theravada at the time, but certainly they know they don't belong to those other traditions. Like that. Now here, when you write this book, you have to understand that the problem is that actually nobody questioned before there's a term called Theravada or not during that time. And this question is only just about 20 years history. People start to say, why I didn't read anything about Theravada, like in Pali text, never mentioned about so-called Theravada. But why you call it Theravada? The same thing. When you look at all the Buddhism, I mean, especially from Pali, from Sanskrit, you never see there's a term called Buddhism. That you could argue that there's no Buddhism. Are you saying that? No. At that time, nobody was saying that I am a Buddhism. They were just, I am follow the right Dharma, and that my Dharma is from the Buddha. That's the language they use.
So my question is, let's say now we keep using this term Theravada, for example, in Sri Lanka, in Southeast Asia. But even under this term, I'm saying, my question is whether they are okay. There is certain schools in Sri Lanka, and now that we call a Theravada lineage, and there might be other schools in nowadays Thailand or Burma. Now we also call them Theravada. But between them or among those schools, what they think about themselves.
Theravada, what do you mean?
No, but I mean, like, Theravada is now the name that we give it to those schools or those lineage. But back then, what would they think? Like, for example, Sri Lankan monk living in the 11th century, and what would they think of the monk coming from Burma or another one coming from Thailand, of that region? Would they all consider themselves a Theravada lineage?
Even though they don't have a term Theravada, they consider them as the same.
Because they have the same Vinaya?
Yep, and they speak the same language, Pali.
Pali, yes.
At that time, their communication means are Pali.
But also at the same time, we know that there is a very strong element of esoteric Buddhism and Mahayana component.
No, that was early time, and later on when the Theravada came to, that not in Sri Lanka. Even Sri Lanka, they have the same problem. Not only that, actually, they even have a Mahayana before, and it's been destroyed later on. So, but they certainly know that this Mahayana do not use Pali. They use Sanskrit. And of course, in Sri Lanka, if you want to be very educated people, to read the medicine, you need to learn Sanskrit. They still have that tradition, even now. But if you tell me that if you go to Sri Lanka, at the time you don't have a term called Theravada, maybe they have a term called Buddhayana, I don't know. They might have a different term that never record, you will never know. They might, but certainly they say, what's your Vinaya based on? I based on a Pali Vinaya. And when you recite the same number, exactly same thing, then they know they are the same. At that time, you could say the people are most naive. You could depend on how you understand. If you have that, but if you say, no, I use Sanskrit, then they certainly reject you. So that's why the Pali was so important language there.
No, but even now, you brought up a very nice point. So even though they both recite Pali.
Yeah.
But let's use an example. Nowadays, for the Thai Sangha, for Mahat Nikaya, they won't recite go to the same recitation with the Dhammadipa?
I mean, what are you talking? Of course. Like I told you our story already. Abhayagiri, that time they don't accept. The Mahavihara don't accept Abhayagiri. Among they also recite the Pali Vinaya. You see, actually, it's one of the. If you look at why you have this so-called Jetavana, and during the 3rd century, Jetavana came. It's of course they had a rival already as a Mahavihara. However, Mahavihara have the rival of the Abhayagiri, and then the Jetavana is I forgot the monk's name. The monk actually, he's a big monk, high monk, very well educated. Unfortunately, however, he have a certain idea, different the Vinaya idea, different from the original Buddhism there. Okay, you don't want to you don't like Theravada. I don't want to say the word. From the original Buddhism, so they think that he is a heresy. Understand? So he was banished, and actually, in certain way, he was excommunicated. But you know, according to monk, he cannot be excommunicated in a certain because he didn't offend the Parajika, the 4 important rule. You know, 就是我们讲 Parajika. You know what is Parajika? You know, the monk sexuality and telling lie. He's not a saint, but he say he's a saint and so forth. Stolen money and what is other? Killing, especially killing people. Killing small things doesn't count. Cow even doesn't count, but killing people. And then, if no one you can excommunicate. But only accused he's not belong to the Theravada. That time no Theravada. He does not belong, he's not faithful to the Pali. And then he go other place, and then later on he was supported by the minister first. And later on the king was even in his favor. So then he set up a new school, Jetavana school. Get it now? He's still reciting the Pali. And also one of the funny part, we definitely have that record. Why he was excommunicated, what the dispute is that he believed that actually people can ordain. You have to call a kid, if I'm not wrong. You know, monk only can be a monk, a bhikkhu. When you have to take the Upasambhada as a bhikkhu, you only have to be 20 years old, right? According to the now so-called Theravada, at that time, their power, okay? And the Theravada will think you have to be 20 years old, means the day you were born, they count. Actually, Sri Lankan people, because their horoscope, the date is very important. Don't forget, just like Chinese, because they believe horoscope so well. When you were born, what time you were born, it's very important for them. Okay? Understand? Because they have a horoscope, you know, everything is about horoscope. Now, so in the Jetavana, actually they count from the mother womb. They start from the mother womb. So that means 9 months or 8 months before. So, and that's one of the disputes they have. But you know, this is a lot of politics over going on. I don't know how to say those things. But for sure, that's the judge. He was insist that that's a thing he doesn't want to change. And he think that the Buddha understood that as a duty in the mother womb. I don't know what his base, because all his sources are gone, burned down. We don't have any further thing. We just have this kind of lie because it mentioned that in the Mahavihara saying that he had that heresy understanding. That's it. Got it. Okay. But he still as a Theravada in a way. If you want to put the Theravada mean the Pali Buddhism, he's still a Theravada. But then later on, the Mahavihara think he's a heresy. Don't go there. And there's no way you come to recite the Vinaya with us. There's no way. Those who are ordained at that, then you cannot recite. And of course, if you look at this in history, when you learn Buddhism, this is what we call the Sangha Veda. I mean, 就是我们叫 Chinese 叫什么 Sangha Veda 是 the
僧团分裂是。
对 what is that 有个字的
System.
No system. That means the Buddhism has spread out. Spread. Yeah, it's her version. 对，就是 it started to spread. Even now in Sri Lanka, like for example, you know, if you ordain a Maha, in Sri Lanka you have 2 traditions. The same he was telling in Thailand, they have Dhammadipa. It was by the king, actually, started by the king. Actually, the king wanted to reform. When he was become a monk, you know, as king, and then he think that the Dhammadipa is more strict, and they are not like, in earlier time of Dhammadipa are more like the Candyman, what do you call, not Candyman, medical monk. You do mostly stay in the forest and striving for arahantship. And the Mahanikaya in general understand is more like, not everybody, but in at the time in Thailand, is become just go for the almsgiving and get good married and then tell the lay people always do the blessing for them. And the Dhammadipa was thinking they forget about the Dhamma, so they only doing the service for that is completely wrong. So that's why you're the Dhammadipa. And because of that, and during the king's time, they were supported by the king. And also the Dhammadipa usually in earlier time when they become a monk, they have to be a kind of like have the royal family kind of not necessarily royal family, you know what I'm saying, kind of like, because the king support that. So a lot of complexity over there. So in Sri Lanka the same thing. It's if you belong to the if you ordain as the what they call the school Shamnikaya, and then you have Shamnikaya, you have Amarapura Nikaya and Ramaya Nikaya. For example, when I become a monk as a novice monk, I was in Ramaya. And then Bhikkhu Bodhi should belong to Ramaya Nikaya. Okay. Because when he tell me who is his teacher, then I know it's Ramaya. I didn't even ask. I don't have to ask. I definitely know. And where he stay, I know it's Ramaya Nikaya. And the tooth relic, for example, is a Shamnikaya. All the big temple, which later on after the British colonization, and when the king had to return those temple, big temple, important temple in Sri Lanka, and mostly are the Shamnikaya, because Shamnikaya have been revived at the time. They have to be noble person and they must be high caste, because in Sri Lanka you have the caste system as well, like India. So that's why at the time, caste is still very powerful, and then that's why. Now that's the reason why the other caste people, they especially not really like low caste, but like just second to the high caste, and that's why they feel that they've been neglected, and they know the Dharma is free and equal. That's why they went to Burma to take the other two Nikaya. That's what we call the Amarapura and Ramanya. Okay. Understand? Even now, the same thing in Sri Lanka. If you're Ramanya and Amarapura, even among them are being neglected or being looked down or being rejected to ordain. Among even these two are still not. You could say they can stay together. No, they don't. So you have Ramanya Buddha Nikaya and Amarapura Nikaya and the Shamnikaya. For Shamnikaya, certainly they don't care. Okay. They definitely think that these two Nikaya. Now this generation may be changed. I know that when I was in Sri Lanka, that was 1987. That time, they are so conservative, and maybe even from they changed a little bit later on. During the 1980 something to maybe 1990 earlier time, still the old monks are looked down to this other Nikaya if they are Shamnikaya. But the reason is very clear, because the caste is different.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So from what? Okay, yeah, that's. But from what the whatever historical evidence that we have so far, so it's safe to say that we have there has been limited footprint or limited components of Sanskrit Buddhism in that region.
Well, like in Thailand now, in Burma now, or in history, or even Sri Lanka now, we definitely know there was Sanskrit Buddhism in that country. Mm-hmm. Now you don't even find one piece of it. Okay.
Yeah. So the history that we learn now, saying that 11th century there's Theravada Buddhism flourished or established in that region.
Yeah.
But how do we know that there is no Sanskrit Buddhism at that time?
Here it just only introduced about, because so far now in the modern time, you don't find Sanskrit Buddhism anymore in those countries. You only found the Theravada Buddhism there. If you're talking about his book, this is what he's going to say. He's not going to deny that. That's why he have a line to saying that when the Thailand started with Dhammadipa, and according to this French scholar, he's a very famous scholar, because he's one of the scholars who earlier time to study the exoteric practice in Thailand. Exoteric practice in Thailand. Because now, when you look at Thailand, you have just a lot of these talisman. Those are the very earlier form of the Buddhism that believe, maybe not necessarily Tantrayana, but they were influenced by the Tantrayana. Because please understand, when we say Tantrayana, do not think that Tantrayana from Tibet is very different.
Yeah.
If you learn the Buddhism in Nepal, they have their own so-called Tantrayana, completely different from Tibet at all, okay? And Thailand have their own form of Tantri. And actually, if you look at the China history also, the China earlier time, they learn a lot of Tantrayana, and few of the powerful Tantrayana are from this Cambodia and Thailand.
Yeah, that's
Those
the place
area.
where I want to go to, because even within, you see, the example that you just mentioned, even within the so-called Theravada countries, there are different, seems like very different kind of practice of.
But their Vinaya is the same, you didn't get it.
Right, but I know the Vinaya is the same, but they might have come up with the manifestation of Buddhist practice might be very, very different.
Look at the Chinese Buddhism. Everybody say they are under the same Vinaya. How different they are. They are Zen, they are Tentai, they are what?
Yeah, I know. So now we all, according to this book, he just used a very broad term, Theravada, to embrace.
No, I said that already when the book was written. Actually, the Theravada term, I forgot which, is only very recently been questioned. The term Theravada was still or not. Otherwise, just understand Theravada Buddhism means as a Pali Buddhism, and they have the Vinaya. For sure, very earlier time, none of them, they don't have any discrimination between the Vinaya, at least the list. Okay. And there's a lot of detail, of course, to be researched. Like whether the Thailand sometimes understand the Vinaya totally as a Theravada or not, of course, maybe not. Maybe actually, at the time, even Thailand, they think you don't count that like the Jetavana school in Sri Lanka. You can count actually 20 years old mean the day when the mother was bearing the baby. Maybe I remember in Thai, they might somehow argue with that too. But you know, that's among themselves, they fight with that. When the other foreign coming in, they don't care. That's not the issue. We don't have that now. We need back the Pali Buddhism. That's, you know, there's a lot, it's not fixed.
I just want to draw up our awareness that even
The same thing about the nun.
Here and there, but there might
No, I said that time the Theravada term is not be questioned. It only this 10 years and 15 years.
I understand. I totally understand that. But my point is, or the place I want to go to is, he keep using the Theravada term from.
Because this is a common term, like the Chinese Buddhism, you can argue what does mean by Chinese Buddhism.
Sure, of course, I understand that.
I don't know why you want to argue with that.
Well, I'm not arguing. I'm just. I don't understand why we have to go on 20 minutes for this. Yeah.
Well, I still didn't get the point, you know. But Chinese Buddhism is a very big topic too. When you say Theravada, it's a very big topic. All right, why don't we just come back to now China, Korea, and Japan, East Asia Buddhism.
The Buddhism of China, Korea, and Japan constitute a unity that can be referred to as East Asian or Eastern Buddhism because it shares a common basis in the scripture resource of Chinese Tripitaka, and because Korean and Japanese forms and schools derive directly from Chinese forms and schools, although they subsequently developed distinctive local traditions. Buddhism began entering China during the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE to 220 CE, probably in the 1st century BCE or CE, principally via the ancient Silk Road through Central Asia. From China, Buddhism entered the Korean Peninsula, 4th century, and thence Japan in 6th century.
Okay, right.
Significant in the establishment of Buddhism as a Chinese life in the following centuries was the appeal of Buddhist ideas and meditation practice to the follower of Neo-Taoism, Shen Xue. Although the growing popular acceptance of this foreign doctrine also prompted periodic opposition from both Confucian and Taoist circles. The Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907, witnessed the greatest flourishing of Buddhism in China. Buddhism continued to flourish until the end of the 13th century under the Song. but the period from the 15th century is generally regarded as one of the relative decline. Yet, in the first half of the 20th century, Buddhism was still the most significant religious force in China. The communist takeover of 1949, and especially the Cultural Revolution from the 66 to 72, brought with them a widespread government suppression of Buddhism, which in the more recent period has given way to a more tolerant attitude. The traditional Chinese Buddhism also continued in Taiwan and Hong Kong.
Okay.
The development of the Chinese canon. When Buddhism began entering China, the Mahayana was still in its early stages of development. The writings of Nagarjuna, Asanga, and Vasubandhu was still to come. The most important early center of Buddhism in China seems to have been at
洛阳
Luoyang, and it is here from the middle of the 2nd century that foreign monks such as
安世高
Ansega and Lokasema
自如家谦
began the work of translating Indian Buddhist texts into Chinese. These first translations included texts on meditation such as the Mahayana
Smriti Sutra.
Smriti Sutra, or discourse of the mindfulness of breathing, and the proto Mahayana
Pratyupana
Buddha
Samyuk
Samyukha Vasutina Tita Samadhi Sutra, or discourse on the samadhi of direct encounter with the Buddhas of the present, and the portions of the perfection of wisdom in 8,000 lines are Asta Saha Srika Prajna Pramita.
Okay.
The manner of these early translations is characteristic of the whole process of translation of the Indian Buddhist texts into Chinese. The Indian canonical collections were never translated into Chinese en bloc. The Chinese Tripitaka, Sanzang, or Great Treasury of Sutras, Da Zhang Jing, evolved over a period of over 1,000 years. Rather than a strictly defined canon, the Chinese Tripitaka represents a library containing all the Chinese translations of Buddhist sutras and sastras made over the centuries, as well as a variety of indigenous Chinese treatises relating to Buddhism. The oldest surviving catalog of Chinese Buddhist texts dates from the 6th century and details over 2,000 works. The first printed edition, produced from 130,000 wooden blocks and completed in 983, contained 1,076 works. Subsequent catalogs and editions, produced in Korea and Japan, as well as China, show some divergence both in the arrangement of the canon and in its contents. The modern standard is the
Taisho
edition, produced in Japan between 1924 and 1932. It's 55 volumes, each some 1,000 pages in length, contain 2,184 works. Volumes 1 to 32 consist of translations of ancient Indian works, 1,692 texts. Volumes 33 to 54 of works by Chinese monks, 452 texts. Volume 55 of ancient catalogs, 40 texts. The whole is supplemented by a further 45 volumes containing works of Japanese origin and other ancillary material.
Okay, right.
The Taisho edition groups texts on more or less historical principles. A more traditional arrangement is reflected by an important catalog produced at the end of the 19th century by the Japanese scholar Bunu Nanja. This is basically a catalog of an edition of Chinese Tripitaka produced in the early 17th century at the end of the Ming Dynasty, which contains a total of 1,662 works and provides the easiest way for gaining an impression of the range and scope of the Chinese canon. The three traditional divisions of sutra, Qing, Jing, Vijnana, Lu, and treatise, Luan, are each subdivided according to the categories of Mahayana and Hinayana, and finally supplemented by a fourth division. The sutra collection is the largest, 1,081 texts. Although largely taken up by the vast corpus of Mahayana sutras, it also contains the Chinese agmas corresponding to the Pali Nikayas. The Vijnana section, 85 texts, contains translations of the Vijnanas of various Indian schools and related works. The third division, 154 texts, is devoted to treatises. This section includes the canonical Abhidhamma texts of the Sarvastivadins, as well as other Abhidhamma Madhyamaka and
Yogacara.
Treatises and commentaries. These three divisions of translations of Indian Buddhist materials are supplemented by
Miscellaneous
collection of writings, 342 texts by Indian and Chinese Buddhist masters.
Okay. All right, any comment? No comment?
Why the Japanese in the early 20th century would like to compose the word?
What is
Why they have a strong sense of need to have, since we have
compose what word?
the Taisho edition.
20th century?
Yeah, no, the early 20th century.
Oh.
1924.
I knew the previous king actually. I think that is a Greek merit to do so, and also very important that time. I forgot what they call that time. Actually, that time in Japan, they encouraged them to go to the West to study. That was the time they were having the combination of the, those scholars, and they go to Germany, especially go to Germany to study, and they brought their teachings, their methodology back to Japan. That was during that. That was I forgot the king name. That was a period, and then the king funded the money, and then these people, these scholar who actually was supposed to be the Japanese priest, and they were teaching university, and then they set up a big team and just composed the Tripitaka. Because we have a problem, at that time, if you're in the Western culture, when you do the research, what Tripitaka you use? I mean, I'm talking about Chinese. What kind of Chinese you use? Sometimes you say, I use Chenlong edition. I mean, you have no Chenlong edition. And then, no, I use other edition. And some even don't no edition. It's just there. Nobody get it into one form. Even China, they did it, but not necessarily Japan have those things also. And even the China have those old tradition of the Tripitaka, but they never collect it together. And then the worst thing is also they don't have the edition called, when you do the research, one thing you must, like a Bible, the same thing you must have the version of like, this word in other versions say this and this. You must have this kind of method. what could call, like you have to show the different edition. The same thing why we had to do the Pali as a Pali text society at the original in early time, because they do have compared the Burmese version and Cambodia, Burmese version and Thai version, and then as well the Sri Lanka version. You must have that. So they did that job. So, and then they were the one who actually introduced us that they have the almost like most comprehensive Tipitaka collected. Yes. And of course, that time the king was support this belief that there was a Greek merit, like in every powerful king, they definitely need to support to have this Tipitaka to be rearranged. Still, we have many Tipitaka, some Tipitaka is not included, okay? Don't think that even Taisho have everything. No. For example, now sometimes we found something new again. It still is not included there. That's why when we do this manuscript study, we have a lot of job to do. We are far left behind for any other religion. Buddhism is the worst research on that, okay? Luckily, recently, lots of people catch that up, no. We have many jobs still haven't done. It's the same thing in Pali. Even in Sri Lanka, you see sometimes catalog is not included. It's, those are detailed. Maybe that only few word differences, for scholar are the major thing. But you still, even in Pali, you have lots of things haven't been done. So, okay. Yes.
It says the Chinese 他说的没有一次全部都从印度翻译过来。那个玄奘大师玄奘法师他取经还不是取了一大堆？
是啊 ，Yes。
那不是算是一次整批的吗 ？On block。
Well, it depends on how you say that. I mean, there was some saying that even Xuanzang Fashi went to India when he got all those texts. Not all the texts were translated.
我有一个题外的问题，玄奘法师带回来的经全部都是印度的吗？还是说也有中亚那边的？
No, I don't think so. I mean, of course, generally believe that certainly must be. What he believed is more orthodox was from India. Because that's what he was suspicious. He knew that at that time in China, lots of translation, maybe they're using a different version, maybe not necessarily was authentic, to his understanding. Of course, what do you mean by authentic is very hard to argue. I'm not here to argue that, but in his idea, the authentic generally means being recognized by the university at that time in Nalanda, of course.
Of which, Master Xuanzang translate 6 out of 7 Sarvastivada Abhidhamma. Why did he left the one? I
forgot there was a reason there. I forgot what he said. I forgot there was a reason there. But definitely that that's the reason why here they mentioned Xuanzang certainly was very great interest in Abhidhamma also. So, and then he retranslated because he knew that the old translation, he doesn't want to use it. Not that, it's for sure he knew there was old translation. He had the old translation with him. He didn't want to use it because he was not very happy with that.
But too bad that nowadays we don't have those translation.
Which one?
Other than Master Xuanzang's version.
We do.
Really?
Abhidhamma Kosa, you have the old translation. Yeah, lots of them lost, and that's why I say it. Lots of them lost, and also, no, some they have. For example, like a Mahavipasa, we have 2 translations, which is very different from Xuanzang Fashi's translation.
People argue that they might come from different sources.
Yeah. Why Xuanzang want to translate? It's because he believes his version is better. Okay, otherwise, why he want to spend the time to do that? Yes.
Is the Japanese version the most complete version? Is that why he keeps mentioning the 2 Japanese versions in here?
No, that time actually because they have a modern approach. They do collect all possible sources from Korea and even Japan, China as possible.
Because I just thought it's a little weird.
May I put it this way, like one of the things about Yogacara, 就是一切部. Actually, China has lost that long time. Everybody know that there has a 一切, but nobody have the text to read. Only they found it from Japan, not from China. Okay. Don't think that you have to know the history. What you learn now, you hear now is complete not a historical fact. No, the China has lost the 一切 is long time.
So like
Yeah.
all the ones that like Qianlong, like I thought there's like also a big collection.
乾隆站, yeah.
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 Like that one is not as complete.
I don't know that you have to check on the history. I don't know whether when the Taisho, 就大正站 the China usually call, the Taisho is the 年号嘛, it's Japan's 年号. And the Taisho version, I forgot, they did mention, if you have to look at their first volume, not first, maybe the last index one. Somehow they have, not volume, they have one of the texts they did mention that what kind of collection they gather. They have a very good detail saying that. I don't remember whether they have the Qianlongzhan or not. I cannot tell you because I'm not expert on this. Because we do have people who do research only in catalog. That's a very complicated issue. Yeah. It's very, very complicated.
I think there are only 4 copies of the Qianlongzhan at the beginning. That's stored in different places in China. One is in Emeisan that I know. One was in Yiheyuan. That one was destroyed during the forming.
But are you sure about that? Or you just hearsay? And please don't believe
so.
many things what the people. I don't want to hear anything hearsay. Okay, I don't know.
I'll do some study on it.
No, yeah, I'm not sure. You know, a lot of Chinese like to hearsay thing and they think it for fact. I don't care. I don't know. So yes.
我有一个题外话。
Yes.
有一次就几年前我参观那个福院嘛，他那个 library 里面，好多种版本哦，各种版本的，那个。
是啊 ，Yeah。
然后
没有啊，也只有目前有的只有巨战啊，没有很多种版本啊。
没有，他就是有各种不同。他说，听他介绍的那位师傅说，这个现在只有这里有，然后其他地方这个就是他们的 collection 是台湾最齐全的。
I'm not sure. I used to use the library, but I cannot tell you. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
不过那是好几年前的事情。
我也是在那边也是很久以前的时候，后来就不知道了。那反而是吧 ？Yeah. The important is not about the. It's also whether you have the first version. My understanding the Qianlongzhan was not 4, it's 8. Yeah, but I don't know. Because as I said, I'm not an expert on that. I cannot remember, and I don't remember that. So no.
How about the wooden blocks that they kept in Korea?
Korea, yeah.
Where was they coming from?
I cannot remember. Also, look at the website. They might be telling you.
Yeah.
So. I mean, of course, that kind of wooden block kind of printing was at first established in China, but they were burned down. I think I forgot that in history they were kept in a certain temple, and then the certain king or whatever when it was burned down. So in Korea, luckily they still survive with their own block also. In those they couldn't use Chinese character. So yes.
So which version of Tripitaka that is?
I think they mentioned, I forgot, they have mentioned that. They based on what? But usually that we call, now they call it as a Korean version already. The version study is a big topic. Okay. All right. Do we need a little break, 5 minutes at least? Yeah, just go to restroom, watch, and then we can come to talk a school of the Asian Buddhism. No, the East Asian Buddhism, yeah.
师父，我刚才讲到。